Prevention is the key to a healthy life. That's why Gunderson Health encourages you to learn about vaccines and how they can help you and your loved ones stay healthy. Vaccines protect against preventable diseases and viruses by boosting your body's defenses. Visit GundersonHealthVax.com to learn more. We connect with storyteller, mime, and artist Motoko. We chatted about Asian folk tales, ghost stories, as well as oral memoirs from her childhood. We get into the practice of storytelling and what to expect from her upcoming performances at the Sandbar Storytelling Festival, October 12th through the 14th in Winona, Minnesota. You can find more conversations on our website, lacrosselocal.com. I'm Amy.
And I'm Brent.
And this is Lacrosse Local.
志を果たして A song from childhood. Unexpected passageway deep into our hearts. Joy too soon faded. Sorrow healed by time. Memories carry us home.
My name is Motoko, and I am a storyteller, originally from Osaka, Japan, now based in Amherst, Massachusetts.
Okay.
I have been a professional storyteller since 1993. I have been doing this for a long time. What led me to it was that my partner, he is a storyteller also, an African American storyteller. His name is Eshu Bampas, and he's the one who said, "Why don't you tell stories?"
So you'd be telling stories and it just thought it was a good path for you to go down, or you're just a talkative person?
That's true. But actually, I was always interested in theater.
Okay.
So I did student theater productions. I did English drama in Japan while I was studying English. And then when I finished college, I decided to become a professional mime.
Huh.
I met a wonderful mime teacher. His name was Tony Montanaro, and I studied with him for 10 years, uh, trying to develop my own mime pieces. I just loved expressing myself without words. But then I was sort of stuck in the proverbial, you've seen mime wall, right? I was stuck in the proverbial box. And that was when my partner said, you can talk. so, so that's how I got into storytelling. First, I started by visiting schools and taking a small part in his assembly program.
Hmm.
So he would do a 45 minutes African stories to, let's say, K through 5 children. I will get on for 10 minutes and tell a story and then get off, because back then I only knew one story. I absolutely got hooked by it because as I was telling the story, I could see the children's faces. And those children, they were looking at me as if I was the most, interesting thing they had ever seen. So just by their reactions, I realized that telling a story orally meant a lot to the listeners. And that's how I got hooked. And I quickly developed my own repertoire so that I can do my own assemblies for all grades and ages.
So you kind of reference that on your website. You say more than ever, children and adults need stories of wisdom, hope, and humor.
Mhm.
I mean, that seems so true. When someone comes in front of you, tells a story, like you said, it just like brightens their face. I mean, how does that all come together?
It's interesting, especially now, post-pandemic. The storytelling has always been there. People always told stories around the fire, or parents telling or grandparents telling stories to children. That's how people passed on wisdom for thousands of years. But at this post-pandemic time, because the pandemic time, everybody was stuck in front of the screen, and especially now we are so video oriented. That concerns me. That is why I like the fact that you are doing a podcast. People are listening to us is very different. And the process is very different because by just listening, the people can use their visual imagination in their heads, right? So they are, in a way, creating their own pictures. I tell kids, each of us has a tiny television in their skulls. And that is so important and interesting. And that's the part of the brain that we don't get to use a lot if we were just watching televisions and videos. So that's the thing. I can say once upon a time there was a beautiful cherry tree. Everyone is imagining a different cherry tree, a different one that's beautiful to them. But if I could just show a picture of a cherry tree on the video, then everybody's looking at the same thing. And the process is not just the same.
Mhm.
I do think that this using that type of imagination, visualization, it has a lot to do with our faculty for empathy. We have to really imagine, especially nowadays, how the other people are feeling, and things like that happens better if you are not just relying on the visual cues. The other thing, of course, is I sometimes tell this to the kids, especially if they're not behaving well. I tell them, look, I'm not a television. I can see you as well as you can see me. But that also means that I care about you. I'm telling you stories because I care, not because I'm a video that you're supposed to watch. So these things all are even more important, I think, nowadays. And so that's my passion.
Trying to get into the mind of a storyteller in a sense. I'm sure you have almost just like not a curriculum, but almost like a set list. Is there a
Yeah.
story in particular that you feel resonates with the most people for you?
I have a fairly wide repertoire of folk tales, traditional tales. I have a wide range of personal tales, tales from my own life, growing up in Osaka, Japan, as well as living here as an immigrant. And the part of the reason why I have a wide repertoire is that my audience helped me develop it. So it's not like one story will be liked by everyone. Every story will speak to different people in different ways, right? I have one is a Chinese folk tale, which I like. And this one basically is about a woman who married a man her parents did not approve of,
Hmm.
which is some kind of what happened to me. I came to this country in the 80s as an exchange student.
Mhm.
So I've been through that. So this Chinese folktale, it's an old story about this woman who didn't get to get married. She was supposed to marry a rich man's son and not her childhood friend slash lover, you know. So then her boyfriend was so disappointed that he left town
Hmm.
and he went to the big city to start a life on his own. But then his girlfriend, the woman he loved, followed him. But then after 5 years, they decided to go back and beg for the parents' forgiveness. But then what happened was that the parents, when the husband went in and said, "Please forgive me, I ran away with your daughter," her parents said, "What are you talking about? Our daughter is here in our house, but she's been sick, very gravely ill for 5 years, and now she's about to die." So
Hmm.
the husband says, "What are you talking about? Your daughter is right outside the gate waiting for you to apologize to you." And so then the old father goes out to the gate to see if his daughter was there, and she was there. Then the old mother went into the back room to see if her daughter was sick, lying in bed, and there she was. But when the woman in bed heard the story, she got up and she dressed herself in the best of her clothes. And she put some makeup on and she looked very beautiful. And she walked outside the house and went to the gate where the two women met. And smiling but without speaking, they stepped right inside each other's bodies and became one woman.
Wild.
So it's a beautiful story. It's a very old story from China. And when I first read this story, I was like, that's a story about me.
Hmm.
So every once in a while, you do find an old traditional story, maybe from your own culture, maybe from somebody else's culture, but that speaks to your soul and say that that woman in that story is me. That story is what, 2000 years old, right? But there are stories abound, and as long as we have our antennas up,
Yep.
you catch a story that you identify with. And that's really the ultimate goal, I think.
It definitely kind of connects you a little bit more to stories and kind of getting outside yourself and how you can relate to other people out there. You really find it even with with a story that's 2000 years old.
I was saying that I'd like to make people laugh, give
Mhm.
joy. But then again, I'm doing other things too, courage, wisdom, compassion, hope, all these things that we need, and beyond that, if people could identify with a character in my story and say, that woman is me, or
Mhm.
that warrior could be me, that would be my most joy.
So just kind of also checking out your website here as well. You teach origami, it looks like. You have the
Oh,
mime for teens. I'm sure
yeah.
that's all wrapped in there with storytelling as well. I mean,
Right, right, right. What they have in common is that they all require imagination from the audience
hmm,
or from the participant.
sure.
What is origami? It's just a piece of paper, but not just fold it, but you look at it with imaginary eyes, and then all of a sudden it becomes a bird
Sure.
or a panda bear or whatever, right? It requires your imagination. The paper itself is really nothing. Same thing with mime. I do this proverbial mime wall. And what is that? It's just my hands. But when you look at it with imaginary eyes, then you see more than what's there.
Mhm.
And
Winona, Minnesota, coming up here on October 12th through the 14th. The second
stand,
annual
stand
Sandbar
by.
Storytelling Festival taking place over those 3 days there, 12th, 13th, and 14th. What can people expect from your shows?
I will probably do a blend of traditional stories, not just folk tales, but other types of traditional stories. One of them is called rakugo,
Hmm,
Rakugo, which is a genre of funny storytelling from Japan, dating back maybe 400 years. And those stories are for adults, just kind of fun. I will do my personal stories, which I like to share, my own experiences of growing up, also living here as an immigrant, maybe even living through this pandemic. I think
mhm.
what we do should reflect who we are and what we do every day too, not just long time ago, once upon a time, but now too. It's both and everything in between.
Mist and beauty fill the air, lovely blossoms scent the breeze. Come with me, let us go and see.
I'm just checking out the schedule here too, and it looks like, are you doing something with Bill Lepp as well?
Right, they're gonna have us share an hour set. So each of us taking half an hour, right?
Friday, October 13th at the Page Theater. You and Bill Lepp will be
Right.
splitting that.
And that would be good. Bill
And
is
then,
wonderful.
yeah. And it looks like on Saturday, October 14th, you got a 2 p.m. that you'll be at the Page Theater as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, when I looked at the roster of the presenters, I'm honored to be in part of such a great lineup. Bill is wonderful, all these people, Diane. Of course, you have your own Minnesota luminary, Kevin Kling. Kevin, really made me think of what we do is I'd like to think of, especially somebody like Kevin. We are chefs. Stories are like food. They are there to nourish us, and really, I could even venture to say we cannot live without stories. Just
Mhm.
like we cannot live without stories are the food for the soul, right? I mean, that's a little bit of a cliche, but when you look at the cliche, how some stories are junk food. They
Sure.
taste great, you want it, but ultimately that's it, right? They don't really nourish you. And then some stories are like slow cooked stew. They're really not just delicious, but they're good for you. and they stay within you and nourish you for a long time. So coming to a storytelling festival is really like coming to a great big banquet where
Yep.
you get to have all kinds of food. You can have dessert first if you want, but then you have some nutritious food. There are lots of varieties, and that's what it's a really an apt metaphor. And listening to Kevin Kling, it really makes me understand that metaphor.
And I also think it's like from the comedic aspect of it to the serious, like you said, it's like a banquet of emotions in a sense too. So I mean, you could be laughing one moment,
Right.
crying the next from some real just professional storytellers.
Mm, But we aim to do that. But of course, ultimately, it's the audience. That's one of the things. I'm sure you hear this from other artists, like musicians or poets. But what we do really heavily is supported by and influenced by the audience. If there's no audience, then it's just a completely different dynamic.
Sure.
But really, what does my story mean? It means something to me, but it might mean something else to the audience. But that's what counts. That whatever it means to the audience is what's important,
Sure.
So yeah, so really this experience is something that we create together. That was one of the things that's been hard during the pandemic, is that we had to do so many Zoom tellings. I'll be there, the audience will be there, and there will be a wonderful exchange of energy between us that will sustain all of us.
For people who want to kind of dig into you, what's the best spot for them to go to find information, maybe watch some videos or
Yeah,
just follow
right.
along?
Most of my stuff is through my website, which is folktales.net. So it's www.folktales, folktales.net.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, you have links to all kinds of pages and my YouTube videos.
La Crosse Local Podcast is a production of River Travel Media. Do you have an interview idea you'd like to share with us? Message us on Facebook at La Crosse Local. Find out more about us at lacrosselocal.com, and you can subscribe to the La Crosse Local Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you like us, rate us 5 stars. We appreciate it.